Thank you, and I think we have time for just a couple questions before lunch. I know we are standing in the way from your metabolism, but just want to see if anyone has any questions, and we'll go a couple minutes over. Right here.
Thank you. They were wonderful presentations. I had a question for Dr. Falk, if it's possible to get her in the ether. Dr. Wallace at the University of Pennsylvania, I think, also has written a number of things on mitochondrial disorders. In one of his papers, he mentions the use of traditional Chinese medicines, or exploring them for treating these disorders. Could anybody say anything more about that?
Oh, there she is.
Was at the end of his paper in Food Forum.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Oh,
You're muted, Marnie.
Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes. We're good.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I work closely with Dr. Wallace, and I think one of the limiting factors in better understanding these, one has been the models, right, in which to test them, and the patients, being well-defined and well-phenotyped. So we've been addressing that. It took Dr. Wallace nearly 30 years to make the first mouse model of a mitochondrial disease, and now we can make models within weeks and months of simpler animals, such as zebrafish, other people's Drosophila or C. elegans. And so we're really starting to now systematically test these, move towards high-throughput drug screens really, of these different components, work with different vitamin and nutrition companies to test their factors. So, for example, there's been a study from Great Ormond Street on some of the components of what's in the ketogenic diet. So, decanoic acid, for example, showing that it's in food, but it might itself be a therapy, so a compounded dietary supplement drug. And so they've shown some nice cell data on that. And so the same thing with Dr. Wallace, in some of the Chinese, Asian, Eastern medicine approaches. There's probably value to all of it. The idea was that we just didn't have the system to test it. And so I think that's exactly what's needed over these next few years, is really systematically testing the different compounds, different natural food product libraries, drug libraries, and really isolating what our component is. We've shown some data that something called epicatechin, for example, which has many different formulations and derivatives. It's in lots of foods, has a lot of mitochondrial targeted benefit. And so there's a lot to be learned again. And I think just thinking them about food, or just thinking them about Eastern or Western medicine, isn't as helpful as thinking what is the component and how is the component really a drug. Because in my mind, as a doctor, our job is to treat patients. And there's been lots of examples where, even just recently in my own clinic, a patient came who goes to somewhere in Asia, finds a plant, brings it back, grinds it up, and gives it to their child, right? So that's not exactly helpful, but it is what's being done by lots of people. And lots of people go on the internet and they buy supplements that haven't been tested. So the truth is there's lots of bioactive molecules. Our job is to turn them into therapies that are controlled, and right now that's drugs. And so, I've worked a little bit with NCATS and FDA, and they've explained to us that, garlic could be a drug, garlic could be a food, garlic can be a device, right? So all of these things, we shouldn't get stuck in what we call them. We should treat them for what they are. And we absolutely should try and find all the therapeutic compounds wherever they are, because, again, a lot of these change signaling pathways, and the ones that do it potently and safely are the ones that we should be pursuing.
Thank you. Another question?
Hi, Bruce Burnett, Nutrition Medical Food Coalition, Red Hill Biopharma. I think Dr. Falk and Barry and Vendetti get to an important nexus of science and clinical medicine with our current structure, and be able to test products that provide for distinctive nutritional requirements. Right now, we're inhibited from doing that. We have to file INDs, which is a regulatory risk. We have no structure to go through development of products. We have no patent protection on natural molecules that allows us to do the developmental work that eventually leads to drugs if we want to make natural molecules to drug. So I was wondering if the panel could just comment on something that we're not supposed to be discussing overall, is that, this is a real problem in structure of how we test nutritional substances, no matter what they may be.
And I think with that too, thinking about the difference between what a nutrient requirement would be for this population versus a nutrient for treatment.
I'll have a comment regarding development of medical food, the glycomacropeptide medical foods. So this was not a new idea, okay? We conducted the research at the University of Wisconsin to provide an evidence base for the efficacy, but it never would have resulted in a product being available had not I disclosed, consistent with the Bayh-Dole Act, because it came from NIH funding, and a patent was issued and is held by the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, which then provided for industry an incentive to step forward and introduce it, because the idea had been there and anyone could have done it long before, but the patent protection provided a commercial pathway.
Could I add one comment to that, though?
Was that compositional or utility, though?
Compositional.
The two-edged sword of those protections is that to follow a drug route, if you want to talk about all those protections, is expensive, and it's passed back to the consumer, so that drugs in the rare disease space become extraordinarily expensive. So that's part of the tension we in rare disease find in developing new products, which is that we so are eager to have those available to patients, yet when they come to market, it's like breathtaking to see how expensive it is. And you have to balance that. One of the reasons medical foods were medical foods and not drugs is to avoid some of that regulatory burden, but it took apart some of the regulatory incentives. So it's a tension.
If I can you hear me?
Yep.
If I just say one thing. So I just have two thoughts on that. One, we really worry about products not being regulated properly that our patients rely on to maintain their lives and improve their health. And there's been a very well-known case of a baby with a urea cycle defect who needed citrulline, and was taking it from the internet, and it was fine. And then the batch changed, and the child died, and it was found that there was no citrulline in the citrulline that they had ordered. So those types of problems are really inexcusable, and it has to do with the regulation. So again, whereas we want to keep the cost down for general health improvement, when we're talking about somebody whose life depends on it, I think we need to work together to create a better regulatory framework. I also think it's important to change the way, again, of how we think about getting to approval. So a lot of, cancer trials or blood pressure trials might cost, hundreds of millions of dollars, be hundreds of thousands of patients in trials. We're not going to get there, but we still need to test things and revisit things. So, for example, niacin is a well-known compound for lipid disorders, that may or may not have benefit in the general population, for different types of lipid diseases. And in mitochondrial diseases, niacin and its different formulations is probably a direct therapy for a deficiency state. So we have to rethink about things. And, and the other thing is, what might be good in our population might not be good in the general population. I think carnitine is a nice example of this, where there are certainly fatty acid oxidation diseases where carnitine is essential, but there's people in the general population who take it where over time it's been shown to lead to coronary artery disease. So I think we just need to, as it was stated in the last session, really wrap our heads around which populations we're talking about, right, and what we're developing as a therapy. And in anyone at this table who's treating a rare disease, we need therapies, and we need regulated therapies that are made properly and regulated properly and made available to our patients.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, Tim Mork with Spectrum Nutrition. Just a closing comment. It sounded to me that there was a lot of negativity coming out about medical foods here. And I wanted to kind of dial back the clock and say, number one, there's no profit incentive to make them. Mm-hmm. These were philanthropic, these were life-saving, life-altering products that early innovative companies were willing to make at a loss, and no funding. Well, Orphan Drug Act, was created not to define medical foods, but to provide funding for research on orphan drugs. That lasted about 2 years, and that's about it. But I just want to make sure that there's no research, there's no ongoing research to do the kinds of studies. Who's funding these? And the companies are getting a little bit of a bad rap here. I don't have any personal relationship today, but I have had in the past, and I think they deserve recognition that the industry stepped up and created these products that, in fact, maybe not perfect, but certainly are life-saving.
If we came off that way, I'm sorry, because I couldn't agree with you more. And the companies continue this production despite the fact that it brings no profit to them, whatever. So I would say, rather than thinking of this in a negative sense, I would say we need research to help companies have the ability to improve these products. They would love to improve them, I'm certain, but they really can't have the wherewithal to do it, and we don't have the wherewithal to do the studies to help them. That's where the negativity is coming from, is that we need those research events, not because the companies are doing a bad job, because we need better products, and we need to help them get it.
Yeah, I would also echo the comment I made when I spoke, which is, I'm definitely not against medical foods. If patients with PKU didn't have medical foods, I think, we know from history what would happen to those patients. And I've been approached by a number of companies after they've heard about our research, expressing an interest to make a better formulation. We're driving the process forward. But the first step is discovery. Discovery of perhaps not enough research for whatever the reason. There's not an investment from the company, or the person that was doing it didn't read the papers, or the information wasn't known. So, the research has to be done, and it has to be unbiased. Mm-hmm. And, I think it also speaks to the comments that Sue made, which is the PKU model doesn't apply to every other type of medical food. I mean, this is evolution, scientific translational research evolution that we're in the process of right now. So, just to be clear, I don't think anybody here is saying medical foods have no place in management. We're rather saying, we have to do research to be careful about exactly what we're giving the patients. That would be my comment.
Thank you. And I think to kind of close that, it's also a sort of a cautionary tale on, everything that we have learned in the inborn errors of metabolism field, and how that can be translated to other fields, and not taking a one-size-fits-all approach to a variety of different disorders. So with that, we're going to close for lunch. Speakers and workshop planners, lunch is provided in the west room where breakfast was. For everyone else, you can go to the cafeteria, which if you go back towards the entrance, there's a stairway to the left, and just go down the stairs to the cafeteria. And we'll be back here at 1 o'clock. Thank you.